In today's video, I'm going to show you 5 opening traps that will very likely trick your opponent. So let's start with the first trap. We're going to be looking at this from Black's perspective. Black plays the Sicilian Defense, White plays knight f3, the main variation, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, pretty standard. White plays knight c3. In this position, everything opens up in branches as Black, so you can play a6, the Nachtdorf, g6, the dragon. But Black plays knight c6, this is the Richter Rauser. White plays bishop g5, the main line. Black plays e6, very logical to get bishop e7 at some point. And after queen d2, we have the first trap of this video, which is pawn to h6. In this position, White played bishop h4, which is a mistake. This is falling into the trap. So I invite you to pause the video and try to find it. Okay, assuming that you already paused the video. In this position, Black wins a pawn with knight takes e4. In the game, bishop takes d8 was played, but after this, you just take back the queen, of course. And it turns out that, yeah, after some complications, you're just up a pawn. And not only that, but Black is with the bishop pair. In fact, White already can't do anything. If you play knight takes e4, queen takes h4 is also quite annoying. The best move was queen f4, but after knight f6 back, it's a healthy pawn for Black. So Black should be able to win. Trap number 2. We're going to be looking at this from White's perspective this time. It's going to be another Sicilian, but this time after knight f6, White plays bishop c4. This is a very trendy line by the time this video was made. And this bishop c4 idea has that after knight takes e4, which is the position we're going to analyze, White plays queen h5. Kind of a scholar mate-ish idea, because the bishop and the queen are working together against the f7 pawn, something we've looked at. And you're going to say, David, this is a rubbish trap. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say g6, White plays queen d5, and wins, which is true, because the knight and f7 are both attacked. You can't do anything to protect both of them, so you're winning. So this is winning for White. You're going to say, David, it's not, e6. And after this, d5, I got you now, bishop e5. Then you're just up a piece. But that's not the trap, surprisingly. I wouldn't recommend such a garbage thing. Sorry. In this position, Black plays e6. And there's actually a game between Magnus and Nepo in this position. Just to tell you that this is a sensible thing. Stuff. After e6, now you're gonna say, well, okay, now we don't have anything. Well, this is the real trap. White plays bishop b5 check, and most of the time, anyone, in fact, if I was Black, I would really be tempted to play bishop d7. And bishop d7 is not a blunder, but it gets White an advantage after knight takes e6. Black can't take with the f-pawn because it's pinned. Black can't take with the bishop because it's pinned. And if Black plays something like queen a5, which many people will do, you just play bishop d2 and it's a loss of tempo. What does that mean? Black has to move the queen again. So something like queen b6. If you play knight takes d2, bishop takes d7 check, you win a queen, you win the game, you become happy. The bishop d2 would be a good move there. Same thing with queen b6. You play bishop e3, you gain a tempo on the queen, and you're just developing your pieces. And after queen e7 or queen f6, which are the best moves, queen e7, let's say, White plays knight c7, removes Black's castling rights, and goes back to d5. And after queen e5, which is forced, you exchange into this endgame, and White is slightly better. In this position, instead of bishop d7, Black has to find knight d7, and this is the way to prevent the trap. Even though you still allow knight takes e6, which is the main line, and there's some games in this position, now Black can safely play knight f6, and everything's fine. So the trap that we saw is bishop d7, but if Black, just for your information, sorry, if Black has to play knight d7 after knight takes e6, knight f6, and this is equal, so you're safe. Knight takes d8, knight takes h5, you get into this position, and you shouldn't have any trouble as Black. Let's take a look at the third trap. We're going to look at this from White's perspective again. And already here, you're going to say, David, what is this rubbish? What are you saying? a3? Are you kidding? Well, move 1 a3 is actually tricky if you know that your opponent is going to play the Scotch Opening. And this is what happened in this game. By the way, these guys are strong. 25-60 playing a3. This is modern chess in its finest. Black plays knight f6, knight c3, d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5. This is what we call the reversed Scotch. What does that mean, David? If you grab this position and you flip the board, this is what we know as the Scotch defense. But now we're looking at it from White's perspective, because White is saying, okay, I waste the tempo with a3, I'm playing with the Black pieces. The real important thing here is that White can play queen h5 in a better version. Now you get to see why White played 1 a3, which is that after knight c6, play bishop b5, White is now threatening to take the pawn again. And in the main line, if White had the pawn on a2, Black would play bishop e7 followed by knight db4. And now, oh sorry, why is that? Now knight takes e2 is a threat. In fact, the main line would go king d1, but of course there's a pawn on a3. Not on a2, on a3. So of course, obviously White would take. That's why a3 is such a useful move if you know for a fact that Black is going to play the Scotch. In this position, Black had to play queen d6, and after knight f3, just for your information, black already made a mistake, which is knight 63, the equalizer. And the reason why this is not, something extremely innovating is that black actually can equalize with knight f4. This is the best move, but it's actually a quite tricky one to play. Even more so if you're playing in a blitz game, because you have to calculate that after queen takes e5, sorry, and knight takes e5, there's knight takes g2, king f1, and bishop h3. You have to calculate that after knight takes e6, there's knight h4 check, bishop g2. Who's gonna find that in a blitz game? Let me know and I'll report him myself. This is very difficult to find, but this is for your information. If you're in a classical game, this is what black has to play to equalize. Let's see what we have for the fourth trap. So in this position, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez. Black plays knight f6, and after castles we have what we call the Steinitz defense with d6 of the Ruy Lopez. White plays d4, very logical move, occupying the center, getting ready for takes e5 or d5. Black plays bishop d7 to counter both of those. White develops the knight, and after bishop e7, rook e1, very natural move. Once again, you're getting your rook into the game, protecting e4. Black, in the database, makes this mistake so many times, and it's not only, 2000 lower rated players. Actually, strong players, IMs, are making this mistake, which is castling short side in this position. This is now losing a pawn by force. Now, for your information, black's best move is e takes d4, and actually this is playable for black. So this is, okay, white has a small plus, but okay, this is a lot of theory, and this is the best way to play as black. But okay, black castle short side, this is now a mistake, and I'm going to invite you to pause the video and try to figure out how to win that pawn. This one's actually quite tough, but yeah, give it a shot. Okay, assuming that you've already paused the video, in this position, white can actually take on, white made the mistake of playing bishop g5, but white can actually take the pawn after bishop takes e6, bishop takes e6. If b takes e6, you're taking the pawn even more easily. You can take the pawn on e5, and after d takes e5, not to take the pawn directly, but to exchange the queens first. That's very important. In this position, there's actually a difference between black taking with the f rook or with the a rook. But in order to understand that difference, let's say we take with the a rook first. So black takes rook a d8, and in this position, as I said, you can actually take the pawn. Knight takes e5, and now if black doesn't do anything quick, you're just going to be off a pawn. So black has to play bishop takes e4. Knight takes e4, by the way, doesn't work. Take here, and this is a whole piece. David, black had this Intermezzo-Zwischenzug. No, check, and then you take, and then you're winning as white. So black has to play bishop takes e4, and the whole idea and the whole thing that black is banking on is the back rank. Because after knight takes e4, if you were to make this mistake, you're getting checkmated, back ranked. So in this position, the winning move, once again, I invite you to pause the video, is knight d3. And the problem for black now is that if you move the knight anywhere sensible, like knight f6, then you're just losing the bishop. So black is going to try to hold on to that knight, but you insist with f3. And David, okay, you're going to say, David, there's still something that black can try, which is bishop c5. Well, this is the whole idea, and this is why this one was tough. You take, and before you think, actually black survived. Bishop g5. And the idea is that now you're playing bishop e7, forking the rook and the knight. You end this whole combination in a beautiful way with c4. There's no way for this rook to keep defending the knight, so this is winning for white. Now, remember I told you that it mattered which rook takes on d8? Well, if black were to take with the f rook, we'd continue with the main line, but now the difference is that after knight d3, f5, f3, bishop c5, you can actually go king f1. If you were to try to use the same idea, bishop g5 is no longer that efficient because there's nothing to hit with bishop e7. King f1 is the winning one in this position. If there was a rook on f8, this wouldn't be winning because every time f takes e4 would be check, and that would be taking the knight. But now that there's no rook on the f file, your king is a little bit safer and you are winning. Let's go into the last and the most, actually, I think the most exciting out of all of these traps, which is, yeah, you will see. So we're going to be looking at this from white's perspective. This is the highest level trap in this whole video. In this position, white goes for some sort of cold system type of thing, but then black goes for a Queen's Indian. We're not going to focus on the opening. We reach this position. It's an IQP, isolated queen's pawn. And after queen g4, very strong move, white is threatening bishop h6. So if black were to play a nothing move, which is a6, bishop h6 is now already putting pressure on the king side. You would have to sacrifice the exchange, and this is no ideal, of course. After queen g4, black played knight f6. Once again, f5 would be a little bit too weakening, and after queen e2, there's a variation like this, which people say that normally black doesn't get to equalize. So this is already a quite decisive strategical advantage. That's why black plays knight f6. And here we have queen h4, setting up the last trap of this video. In this position, black made the mistake of playing knight c6. The best move was knight bd7, which looks a little bit unintuitive. There's some line with rook d1 and rook e8, and the game goes on. But in this position, black made the mistake of playing knight c6. David, why is that a mistake? Well, pause the video, try to figure out by yourself, so you can learn some chess and become better. Okay, assuming that you already paused the video, in this position, white threatens to checkmate on h7, or I should say creates the threat of checkmating on h7, which is bishop g5. Why is that threatening to checkmate on h7? Because if black makes a nothing move, once again, bishop takes f6, and queen takes h7 would be winning. So, in this position, black has a couple of ways of defending from that. g6, h6, and knight takes e5. All of them are quite easy to get rid of. For example, h6 would run into bishop takes f6, followed by queen e4. There's mate on h7. There's knight takes e6 as a threat. Game over. So that's h6. g6 usually happens, but now white has bishop a6. This is the beautiful move that I wanted to show you, in which black can't take, but this is not working. Knight takes e6. You're forking the queen and the bishop. Eventually you take, queen h6 is coming, queen g7, and you win immediately. This is why we're here, to win immediately with opening traps. And what happened in the game, which is knight takes e5, but now this is not working. Not because of what happened in the game. What happened is what d takes e5, which is throwing away all the advantage after something like this. White played bishop h6, claiming that the king set is quite weak, but black simply goes back and it's not clear. What white has to play is bishop takes f6. Queen takes h7 is once again threatened. If black tries to block it with knight g6, you simply take. And now queen takes h7 and bishop takes e7 are threatened. So black's best tries knight takes e3, but even this, you take on e7, you fork the queen and the rook. And after something like that, white is absolutely winning. White just has to convert this.